Welcome back, everyone, to the Culture Based Podcast. I'm Dustin. He's Blake. We hope you had an amazing Thanksgiving. As we release this, it is Giving Tuesday. Get out there and give and support the nonprofit organizations in your life. That's a big deal to me, as I spent many years in the nonprofit sector. So get out there, give today. Don't just be all about the getting and what we get to get on Giving Tuesday. But we're pumped to be with you to continue this series on the 6 building blocks of scalable teams. This week, we're going to hit right in our sweet spot. We're going to talk about culture. Before I get into that, I want to remind you that we're here to help leaders know what they're about, show where they're going, and build scalable teams to get them there. I want to remind you, if you're listening on audio podcast platform, if you would please leave a 5-star review, that would super help us out. If you're watching on YouTube, hello there. We're so glad that you're here through this podcast series that we're doing right now. We would love for you to like, subscribe, and ring the bell as well. I want to remind you, you can find us at the Culture Base, BASE, on Instagram, LinkedIn, all the different places, YouTube, like that. We would love to engage in conversation with you there. Or if you would like to have a free 30-minute strategy session with us, you can go to theculturebase.com. All right. I seem like I'm rolling through this because we are rolling through this, because we have a lot of really good stuff to cover and not a whole lot of time to get to it today. So let me just jump right in, because this is something that we could probably talk about for hours and hours and hours, but we're going to try to keep it under 30 for you. We're going to keep it tight. All right. Toy. Here we go. All right. So from the beginning, the Culture Base is set out to help you and your team know what you're about. That's the very first thing we talk about, right? But the cornerstone of this clarity is knowing what culture you want to cultivate. But where do we even begin to understand this building block without ever having intentional investment into its creation?
Yeah, that's good. So as we think about these building blocks, I do want to hit each of them again, because I think getting into that mindset of thinking about those, building block 1, vision, building block 2, culture, right? Then as we start building on top of that, then we look at attracting the right people, then onboarding the right people, then developing the right people, and then lastly, how to retain the right people. Okay, so that's our model. That's what we follow. That's our building blocks. So today,
right, the foundation culture here, right? The foundation here that we're talking about is this vision and culture piece. That's part of the clarity portion of what we're doing here in our key elements. So the foundation is vision and culture. So last episode we talked about vision. This episode we're going to talk about culture.
And these two tend to sit below the ground if you're actually thinking about building. You don't see all of the stuff that has to go into this. And the thing is, a lot of times when you don't see it, you don't think about it. You don't put the right stuff into it, and you start building on crappy foundation. And I'm not going to go into a ton more about that, because you've probably heard every nuance of metaphor about why the foundation's important. All I'm saying is, if you haven't listened to that, you're probably not going to listen to this. But I'm telling you, you need to, because culture is the foundation. That if you don't have that and a clear vision and a culture that is built around that vision, you're not going to go very far. Okay. So having said that, I want to hit what culture is real quick, what it is not. Okay. We've talked about, what is it? Peter Drucker says that culture eats strategy for breakfast, I think, which I love that quote, but I always will return to the fact that it makes culture sound like an untamable animal. And I don't believe that's true. Okay. I do believe culture is alive, but as I've said many times, I think it's alive in the sense that it's like a garden. Okay. And I love this picture of what culture is. It's your garden. And so, you got to think about the different crops, the different plants, the different flowers. Like, you've got to be the master gardener of your culture. Okay. It puts responsibility of culture on you, instead of, oh yeah, our culture just is however we feel and however it's been flowing. And, we've had a good culture for so many years, but I don't know how I can step out of the business and have that culture continue, because that culture has probably been built just on your personality for so long, and you've been in the business, but that's not repeatable if you don't have a culture built around a vision. Okay, so this is where you got to start thinking about, okay, what are the different plants? What are the different generations within our team? I mean, why does that matter? Well, why does it matter if you have a plant that needs a lot of sun or in a plant that's more of a shade plant? Now you've got to think about where you put those things, how you invest in those things. Do they need a lot of investment? Do they need a little investment? Is too much investment, too much water, too much focus like going to be bad for it because it's a more autonomous plant? And I know I'm jumping back and forth between metaphors, but knowing your different generations, so important to this. Knowing your different personalities of people. Introverts and extroverts need very different things. Thinking about that. A master gardener studies these things very closely. They're YouTubing constantly. They're looking for the masters in that field just on like, oh, what's the right master on the tulip? You know, I'm going to look into the tulip and that's it. And I'm going to study this. And we don't do that with our own businesses. And it's a miss. We should be doing that with our businesses, because when you get to that point, you're going to be able to go into a hiring event or something, and you're going to see what you're looking for. You're going to see what the needs are for that person and how to develop that person. And you're going to see very clearly what's not part of your garden. Okay. And you're going to be able to start seeing those things. So the one thing I want to say before we kind of dive in, you know, we're going to talk about different types of culture on this podcast to kind of give different verbiage to different aspects of how we see culture happen. But one thing I want to be very clear about, there is no such thing as no culture. No such thing. Anybody who's like, oh, we don't have a culture, they don't understand culture. Remember how we said culture is environment. You're saying you don't have culture, that you're out in space? It's not true. Okay. You do have culture. And even in a garden, when you don't do anything to the garden, stuff still grows. It's just weeds, and it's the stuff you don't want growing. And then it takes over the good stuff. And that is a great metaphor for exactly what happens on our teams.
Yeah. Yeah, you either intentionally cultivate your team culture or you leave it up to chance, which leads to rot and ruin and weeds and all that stuff. As Blake was saying, we're going to quickly give you these, what we call the 7 types of organizational culture. And you're going to hear more from us on this. You're going to see a podcast series and all sorts of additional content coming out in 2024 about this. But I want to just kind of break it down. And as I'm breaking it down, I want you to think about which one of these does it sound like you're a part of right now? So that, because identifying the problem is the first step to solving the problem, right? So which one of these does it sound like you're a part of? These 7 different types of organizational cultures. First one is simple, right? It's the ideal culture, right? This is where it's what everyone wants, but very few or no one is willing to cultivate, because it takes real hard work. When you know that there are people intentionally, are there people on your staff that are hired specifically to cultivate this ideal culture? Are there people who are waking up and falling asleep thinking about it? Those are the moments where you know that you're in the ideal culture. Do you have a chaos culture? This is where everything changes with the leaders' focus shifting constantly. We all have worked with these leaders before, where every week or every month or every quarter, they have a new idea and they have a new focus, and they're like, now we're focusing on this and now we're focusing on this, and there's no stability, right? And so it's constant chaos. You're part of a chaos culture. Third one is
that one real quick. The fear of the chaos culture is going to be that people are going to burn out. Okay. Yeah. Some people thrive and they don't see a problem in this one. But people will burn out because not everybody can see the vision inside your head that you keep changing. And you're like, oh no, it fits because it'll attach to this and this and this. Nobody else can see that. Yeah. What you see in your head, and nobody's got backstage passes to see. So you will burn people out if you operate in chaos culture too long or don't have other people who fit that. And generally they don't exist like that.
Yeah, which is not to be confused with burnout culture, which is another one, right? This is where we're constantly living fast and die hard. It's all work, no play. It's go, 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 eat, sleep, breathe, getting the job done constantly. That's a burnout culture, whereas chaos culture is things are constantly changing. And you don't know what the target is from day to day, right? There's also an ambiguous culture. This is where there's lack of clarity. It may not be so much chaotic, but it's quiet. I don't really know what we're doing here. I don't really know where we're going here. I don't know what our focus needs to be. What's the most important thing right now? That's a real ambiguous.
For this?
Who's responsible for this? Is that my job? I don't know. I thought it was your job. I thought it was your job. I thought it was my job. That's an ambiguous culture. There's theater culture. This is where the culture and the organization thrives on drama. They get extremely bored without it. If there's not some drama, if there's not some major problem to fix, then they feel like they're not doing anything. It's really a busy culture more than it is anything else, but we call it a theater culture because it thrives on drama. Next, there's a silo culture. This is made up of individuals, not teams. It can be very cliquey. You can see little departmental cliques. It's very selfish, the culture is. It's internally competitive. Sales against marketing, against operations, against HR, against all these different, right? Oh, if they would just get their act together, then everything would be fine. That's a silo culture. If you're using words like they and us kind of thing, we, them, that type of stuff, that's a silo culture. That's something you want to look out for.
There is difference. Competition's fine. Like, it's when it becomes a demonizing others to get there instead of a, like, how can I help them to get there? You know, it's the whole, there's only two ways to get ahead in life. Either one, you got to work your butt off and excel, or you've got to tear someone down to get there. The silo culture tends to do the other one. They tend to tear others down and demonize the other person or a group, or throw them under the bus because they don't understand the most important thing, which in silo culture is, it also kind of like groups with ambiguous culture, because nobody said the most important thing. Nobody's exclaimed what the team is and how it all functions together. So usually ambiguous culture also births out silo culture.
Yeah. And then our last one is hustle culture, which can be confusing sometimes to burnout culture, because in burnout culture, you just go. Hustle culture is thrives on last minute survival. They go, oh, we just got to hustle this one out, right? If you're constantly hearing that every single week, we just got to crank this one out. We just got to hustle this one out. It's last minute. It's 11th hour. That's the hustle culture. And before you know it, it will disintegrate your entire operation.
Yeah, that's good. That is good. So now those are the different types of cultures we see and experience. And there are probably other ones too. These are just really prevalent ones that are pretty easy to see, especially in small business transitioning into large business. The early ones, I think, tend to be more small business, and then it grows into this massive garden that becomes way too hard to change, and not impossible, just becomes incredibly difficult. But as we talk about with each of these building blocks, there needs to be this strategic, logistical, and distribution mentality. We call it the SLD. What is the strategy behind getting to ideal culture? What are the logistics we need to do and have in place in order to get there? And how do we distribute this in a clear way across our generations, personalities, and organization to get there? And so if you'd only think about strategy and, man, we could totally do this, and then you jump onto the next thing, you're just playing chaos culture again, right? And ambiguous culture. You're just jumping from thing to thing and not giving clarity. And so that's why we've got to go through the strategic, logistics, and distribution every time. So strategy, Dustin, what do we do strategy wise in culture?
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake people make here and organizations make here is they don't actually take the time to think through and be intentional about their culture. And that's really where you're going to see the strategy take hold. It's things like having an annual strategy session specifically for your culture, right? Like we always have an annual budget meeting, or we have annual vision target kind of meeting. Is there an annual time block for you to discuss openly with your team or with your leadership team what your strategy is going to be to cultivate the ideal culture over the next 12 months or however long you're going to do it for? I would suggest that you don't do it any less than annually. If you're like, oh, that's something we only need to do every 3 to 5 years, then you're going to wake up one day and you're going to find yourself in one of the other culture types, and you're not going to be happy that you're there. I think at the very least, you need to be reviewing this annually. You could go quarterly. Monthly is probably too much to really kind of constantly be shifting strategies. But I think as your company and your organization grows, you need to be looking at an annual strategy session. And then part of that stuff too is like, are there culture feedback loops? There are a lot of great softwares and questions that you can find for free online. I know it's some stuff that we're going to be developing ourselves in the future as well. But quarterly, at the least, I think you need to be having some type of a culture feedback loop, whether it's in your one-on-ones or it's an anonymous survey. You need to be getting feedback on these things, and that's part of that strategy. And then also your brand messaging strategy. Your brand messaging is not just for your external sales or your external marketing. Your brand messaging is just as equally important for your internal culture. And so what kind of strategy are you going to have centered around that? How is it going to align with your culture? How is it going to align with that vision to establish a really firm foundation?
And as you think about that annual strategy session, don't make this too hard here. Okay. Yeah. But I think a SWOT analysis specifically on your culture is so healthy. Hey, team, tell us about our strengths of our culture. What do we do really well? What are the weaknesses we have in our culture? Like, what are the areas that, and if you have to make it anonymous because you're not at ideal culture and people are afraid to share things, candidly at this point, then make it anonymous, because people are going to give you good feedback. And it doesn't say anything about your culture that people want to give anonymous feedback, okay? Because everyone's just not a talker. That's just sometimes the way it is. And then what opportunities do you have this coming year to grow your culture? You don't have to be perfect. This is a lie that everyone falls into. If they're not ideal, they give up. What? No, you're not ideal. We're constantly seeking ideal. We're constantly seeking progress. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for progress. How do we continually build to get there?
It's ideal. It's not perfect.
Exactly. And so what is ideal this next year? There you go. Okay. What's ideal this next year? Here's our opportunities. Okay. What are the threats to our culture? Our threats, I'll tell you one of them real quick. Threats, bad hires. They're bad hires. And to almost put a fear on your team of a bad hire, because if you make the fear of a bad hire a thing that's universally believed in your team, guess who's looking out for that bad hire? Everyone. Okay, so doing a SWOT analysis within that strategy session, just on culture, it'll do amazing things for you.
Yeah. And so that's where we move from strategy into logistics. Why don't you kind of set the stage for what logistics looks like for us, Blake?
Yeah. So here at the Culture Base, we have the Culture Base cultural analysis, where we go through, and there are different aspects of culture, right? Like, just even in the culture itself, we're asking questions, coming up with, Dustin even talked about it. There are a lot of free things out there that have really good questions. We say this all the time. Be so intent at asking great questions, and create it in such a way that the question is not yes or no. Don't look for that kind of stuff. If you want, like, hey, on a sliding number chart, where are we at in this category? That's great. Okay. That'll give you good averages across the team. But look for good feedbacks. Look for examples of the good stuff and look for examples of the bad stuff. Okay. We'll also dive into, on the logistical side, not just your cultural analysis and what kind of culture you have, but also your core values. I think it was last time we talked about, maybe 2 times ago, that like one of those big meta things is culture, but it is held accountable by our core values, right? Like the core values prove the bigger thing of culture. And so what are you doing? What are the core value workouts you're doing, to look at, do we have the right core values happening? Or how are people rated on a core value perspective? So I think those are a couple things logistic wise. What else you got, Dustin?
Yeah, I would say too, with the core value workout, what we do for the culture-based core value workout is many people don't have values, or they're pretty muddy, right? It's that ambiguous culture. Yeah. And so what we do is we'll come in there and help you kind of define and refine what those are, what's organically already happening that you want to emphasize, that you want to kind of blow up. Those are the areas where we're going to really work out those core values. Something that I've used a ton, which I think is super helpful. This helps with in the ambiguous culture. It helps in cultures where you're not sure where you're going, chaos culture, all that type of stuff, is a good this, not that list. Hey, here at X organization, we are known for what we're for, not for what we're against. Not that, right? This is what we're for, comma, this is what we're not. And so any kind of list that you can come up with like that in your brand messaging, hey, we call them team members, not staff. Any of that stuff, right? Like whatever it is that's important to you. If you can come up with a little defined, if it can fit on an index card and you can submit it to, and have it on everybody's desk or tape it to their monitors, then everybody starts to speak the same language. That's where the logistics really hit the road there. And then quarterly culture building events, I think, are a must. A lot of people look at these as a waste of times.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, if you don't do it, then you're just all talk and you're not action, and you'll never get to the ideal point with your culture.
Yep. So true. And those have like, there's so many creative ways you can implement those. And a lot of people are like, I don't have the money for that. You don't have to have the money for that. Okay. Just make it about being together, intentionally having a moment with people, and just getting the team together to focus on something, not on work, but the fact that the person is of value. Right. So that's big. I think the next part, we have the strategy, we have the logistics, and then the distribution. How do you get this out? How do you make sure this is hitting your team consistently? And one of them is highlighting a win from a culture value in your meeting. I love that. I love being able to be like, hey, instead of being like, hey, we're a we, not me culture, and just saying that over and over, but saying, oh man, I want to show you what John did last week. He went out and did this. Bill. You were thinking, okay.
Yeah.
I want to let you know what Billy John did last week. And he went out and he did this, and we didn't even ask him to do that thing, but he went over and beyond and made sure he was set up for his team the next day. Way to be we, not me. And to celebrate those things and to call those things out. And if you have fun things you can do associated with it, do it. Like, don't be afraid. Oh, I'm afraid I'll be cheesy. Who cares? Like, John Acuff says that sometimes our fear, and I'm going to butcher this, sometimes cool is just a way that we hide the things that we deeply care about. And it's a form of cowardice. I think that's what it is. Sometimes cool is a form of cowardice from keeping us from doing the things we deeply care about. That's what it is. And it's so good because get the fear of everyone else out of your head. Care about the culture. Okay. Yeah. And if people are like, that's corny, be like, yeah, you're right. My bad. Let's do this instead, but like, just don't be afraid of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing too, I think you need to make sure your annual reviews, number one, if you're not doing annual reviews, you should be doing them, because that's going to provide a ton of clarity and a ton of, it's going to really fight against that chaos and what was the ambitious or the ambiguity? Ambiguous. I always say ambiguity. Ambiguous culture. It's going to fight against that. But if you can have your annual reviews based around your culture values, that'll give them even more legs. So let's just use the one that Blake just talked about. Hey, it's we, not me, or is that what he said?
Yep.
We, not me. It's a we, not me culture, right? So if I would come in, if I had Blake sit down in an annual review with me, I'd say, all right, Blake, on a scale from 1 to 5 this last year, I thought you maybe 3 met my expectations. 3 would be meeting my expectations, right? I think you met my expectations on what we, not me, looks like because you did X, Y, and Z. Right. Yeah. You met those expectations and you gave examples. Or, hey, you exceeded those expectations and here's how you exceeded them. Or you came a little short on the expectation of we, not me. So let me talk to you about those instances specifically and how we could have seen that play out better. That's giving a ton of legs, a ton of foundation to your culture, and that will define it over and over again, because people will begin to measure their success or their failures based on the culture values that you're trying to implement. Last thing I would say too is implement culture values to vetting and your onboarding process. You should be hiring and firing, and just the same way that you're reviewing an annual review, you should be hiring and firing based on your culture values. Otherwise, who really cares, right? At the end of the day, if it doesn't get me hired or it doesn't get me fired, I don't really care, right? At the end of the day, but if that's what you're measuring success on in your organization, then people will begin to pay attention very quickly of what these culture values are and what culture is supposed to look like for you and your organization.
Yeah, that's so good. That is good. I don't think I have anything else to add to this, honestly.
I thought you were going to come in and be like, yeah, also these 8 other things.
Nope. I know you had that look, and I was like, I don't have anything.
Does he? Is he answering? With it? Is it? No. Okay. Man, I know we breezed right through that, but like I said, we were going to roll fast through it. There's so much other stuff in here that we're going to be bringing to you in later episodes and series as well. Our next episode, we're going to be, let's see, I didn't include the notes here at the bottom, but it will be part 3 of our 6 building blocks of scalable teams will be attraction. Just give us like a 10-second. What does that mean, Blake?
Attraction is all about, it's not just the hiring. It's about clarifying all the stuff from this culture in your vision to looking for the right person. It's setting up the right questions to make sure you are hitting someone who hits, a plus in the we not me category or whatever those core values are for you. It's about sifting through the bad stuff and getting more than just one focus. It's about how to ask the right questions. And, when you're calling somebody about their employment, like not just being like, hey, they work here, but asking the right questions in such a way that you can get good feedback. Attraction is just, it becomes so important. And there's a marketing aspect to this too. How are you getting people who are coming to your organization? Are they coming because they're a friend of a friend? Are they coming because they hear about how great your culture is? Are they coming because they hear you pay the most and that's why they're here? Like, it's figuring all those things out. And by the way, the pay the most is not necessarily a good thing, but it's about understanding why you're attracting certain people. If all you say is, I can never find anyone good, it might be because you're a bad magnet. It might be because the things that are attracted to you are shit. So,
all right, don't give it all away so far.
Yeah,
don't give it all away. You don't give away the whole episode. Part 3. 6 building blocks of scalable teams. We're going to be talking about attraction. It's going to be amazing. As you can tell, Blake's already fired up for it. That'll be next week. If you're interested in talking to us at all about any of the things that we mentioned today in this very quick recording on culture, you can go to theculturebase.com/strategy and sign up for a free 30-minute chat with us, and we'll figure out what you got going on and help you get to the next level and help you build that ideal culture. Until then, we can't wait to talk to you next time on the Culture Base Podcast.